Hello and welcome to In the Court of the Wenton Knave. This is a big one. This week. Not so much the album we're doing, Broadway The Hardway, but the band which recorded it, the 88 band. So it is here that I will introduce the 88 band. Zappa hadn't been on tour since 84, and there was a suggestion in a couple of things he'd said that he wasn't going to be touring after that, but he did, and he certainly did. Obviously I'm sure this was intended to be the tour to end all tours. It is my favourite Zappa band. Utterly awesome. Rehearsal started in 87 actually, with Flo and Eddie, who were there, and they were playing a load of Flo and Eddie stuff and stuff like that. Subsequently they left. I think the official line is just that they kind of didn't want to do it because of what they were doing at the time was much more mainstream, and they may have upset that by the controversial lyrics, etc., and they weren't that happy about the political stance, which would alienate half their audience, etc., etc. I think the unofficial line is actually was more about money. It wasn't paying a lot for, obviously Flo and Eddie were by this point, they're obviously they're stars. Apparently there was a big Turtles revival because I think Happy Together was in an advert or something, so obviously they were going to be focused on that, which is fair enough. It's not that I wouldn't have liked a Flo and Eddie revival, I'm sure it would have been wonderful, but obviously I'm glad they left because it meant what we got was the other stuff. I see it as a return of the Live in New York, Zappa in New York band, mixed with the return of the 82 band. That's the way I see it. It's very much the really good playing stuff. Wonderful. Tommy Mars was also there initially, but I think stormed out, and there was something controversial there which may relate to what I'm about to talk about. Ray White was there, but disappeared for, well, personal reasons. We don't know what the reasons are, which is fair enough. But the departure of Ray White, which is obviously very sad because of his fantastic vocals, was the introduction of, to the Zappa story, Mike Kennelly, so basically doing the stunt guitar job and also vocals as well, obviously. So huge change there between Ray White and Mike Kennelly in terms of vocals, and that changes the sound quite a lot. Mike Kennelly isn't as good as Ray White, to put it bluntly, but he has his own thing, and that adds a new dimension to it, which is great as well. And obviously in the broader Zappa story, the fact that he's there is brilliant, and he's a great addition. Ike Willis is there, thankfully stayed as well. Yes. Ike is probably the definitive Zappa singer, I think. We've got Ed Mann, we've got Bobby Martin, who I think by this point was being credited as Robert Martin now. He's no longer Bobby Martin, he's Robert Martin. You've got a whole horn section, this is the big thing, the return of the horn section, including the Fowler brothers, which is so important. That's one of the reasons why, to me, the 88 band are it. I love the horns. And rhythm section, we've got Chad Backerman again, so that's good. And Scott Thunes or Scott Thunes, I've heard Zappa say Thunes, I don't know if it's Thunes or Thunes, bear with me on that. That's the controversial bit. For this tour, and for the previous tour, Scott Thunes was the Clone-Meister. He was the guy directing the band when Zappa wasn't there. Zappa wasn't there a lot more at this point. I mean, obviously we know he wasn't very well, but he was also busy in business stuff, and he wanted, a band he could employ to do it and not have to be there for all the rehearsals all the time. So that's fair enough, isn't it? But apparently Scott Thunes was seriously abrasive, to say the least. And there's a whole load of anecdotes about, the way he spoke to people. He didn't really do small talk. He was very, very abrasive. But that's musicians, isn't it? Musicians tend to be not necessarily very social people in that sense. But I think part of the problem was that, as well as that, he played not completely on the beat. So, I mean, this is a very, very talented musician who's played in Zappa's band for a while now and really knows the music inside out, and he would play what he called Scott Thunes' part rather than playing the bass on the beat, and this made things difficult for Chad Wackerman. Now the problem is that mixed with his abrasive personality made people think, I think particularly maybe Ed Mann and maybe the horn section, that he was doing it deliberately to be difficult, because he's at this level where he's mastered the music so well, he's trying to annoy these other players. That's what the band members said it seemed like at the time. It was only once they actually heard the recordings they realised, oh, it sounds really good. That's why Frank kept him there, obviously. I mean, apparently there was also a thing with Ed Mann, that Scott Thunes and Ed Mann didn't get on, and there was already a thing there before they started. Scott didn't want to play with the brass section. He didn't like having a brass section on there, and you are going to have a brass section because it sounds fantastic. Now, Ed Mann was actually the Clone-Meister in 79 and 80, so maybe part of the problem was that Ed Mann felt he should be the Clone-Meister and Scott Thunes had got the job again. Bear in mind, these are incredibly talented musicians. They're the best in the world at this type of stuff. So to have this guy who's kind of a level just a bit above them must be really grating. I mean, apparently once during rehearsals, Frank comes in with the Mo and Herb's Vacation, so Scott Thunes sort of leaps up and runs and gets the seat music and starts frantically playing along with it, and the rest of the band just sit in silence, in awe, really, at this. And apparently Mike Kinley said that he realised this guy was way ahead of him, way ahead of everyone else in the band, which must have maybe rankled with some of them who saw themselves as veterans, and yet there's this guy here. That must be annoying. There was 2 tour buses. One was the smokers tour bus and one was the non-smokers tour bus, and obviously there became a little bit of a thing there, and supposedly finally at the end of the European leg of the tour, Frank holds a lottery with the band, and basically they all voted so they would not do the next leg of the tour if Scott Thunes was in it, except for Mike Kinley. Harsh. I get the impression Art Willis was kind of half and half. That's the general gist of what happened. It seems to be more complicated than that. There was some very nasty things going on. I mean, there was things like they go on stage, come off, and Scott Thunes' laminate pass, his backstage pass, has been stabbed in the face. And there was a thing where the promoter made them a cake with all their names on, and during the show someone had sneaked in and rubbed his name off the list of names. And nasty, snipey things like that, which is pretty horrible. But like I said, it's complicated. I have to recommend this book, Zappa the Hardway. Obviously there's some good Zappa biographies, but this one is great because it is about the '88 tour. And to get the best answer you can, you need to read that, I think. Although it does say, there is a quote from Ed Mann saying, don't read this book. And maybe because he feels bad about it, maybe, we don't really know. So there's no clear answer. I'm inclined to side with the official line from Frank, which was it was basically mutiny. He's hired these people to do a job, and they're saying, I'm not going to play with him. Easy to say that when you're not there, and it's all very intense. But I've been in work situations, thankfully not directed at me, but where everyone has ganged up on one individual, and it seemingly for no reason. I've seen it several times in work situations. Thankfully not where I work now. It's part of human nature, I suppose. But I think ultimately people were being collectively scumbags. And obviously if one does it, the other one does it, and they sort of encourage each other to believe something that isn't entirely true, that this person is so unbearable you can't be with him in the room. And it's just nonsense, really. And it's such a shame, because this is Zappa's best band. But you watch the video Barcelona is available on YouTube. Compared to the Does Humour Belong in Music video, where Scott Thunes is at the front and he's doing all the fun stuff, and you watch Barcelona and he's right back and he's really withdrawn, and that's not cool. There is also a suggestion that anonymously some of the band members have admitted they kind of blame Frank as well. They even thought that he was doing it deliberately because he was enjoying watching people suffer. Which I don't buy that. I think that's nonsense. There was an incident in the Netherlands where the band was slowing down. Basically, I think it was just fatigue, but also the morale was low because of what was happening. Frank starts making fun of them in the lyrics. So in Torture Never Stops, he says, "Are they lazy? Are they wasted? Could it be some of the catering they have tasted?" And he suggested they should do a 3 days rehearsal. And apparently the band were all a bit upset about that. Well, how dare you suggest I should do more rehearsals? But they were making mistakes. So he's employing them to do it. And maybe the problem is that he employed all these veterans of his band who, once they've been through the mill, they change, don't they? And they have expectations, and they are less willing to push themselves. And another big part of the era, of course, was that it was an election year, and Zappa was really pushing the political stuff, as he was on the last couple of albums, but probably more so on this tour than ever before. And actually released this album a week before the election in America, and it is a lot of anti-Republican stuff. Obviously he didn't like Republicans very much. He also didn't like Democrats either, and there is one anti-Democrat song on here as well, but it's pretty clear he wasn't happy with the way things were going. And typically, of course, as with all satire, it made absolutely no difference at all. Much like Spitting Image in the 80s with Margaret Thatcher, it made no difference, and she still won elections, or maybe it helped, I don't know. So many cool things on this tour. The Matson Morgan band, or the two Matson Morgan, actually came and played with them at one point, and this was before they were famous, I think, so that's really cool. And those two actually went on to be in the last Zappa band, which was Zappa's Universe. Kind of the last Zappa band, in that Zappa wasn't technically there. He did jam with them apparently in rehearsal at one point, but the point was to do Zappa stuff without him being there because he wasn't well enough. So they also make up a big part of the story. We have 5 CDs worth of stuff from these releases. There's other stuff later on. There's a Transfusion album later on, which is the guitar solos album, as I said on guitar, that he had another disc's worth of stuff. There's a couple of things on the later, you can't do that on stage anymore, but not a lot, just on 4 and 6. So mostly it's these 5 CDs, and they are all excellent. But there was other things missing. I mean, there was a whole load of Flo and Eddie stuff which ended up not being performed on actually live. Like, She Painted Up Her Face, half a dozen provocative squats, and Shove It Right In, Calling You Vegetable. Take Your Clothes Off When You Dance as well. It's a shame they didn't do that one. Moggio was rehearsed. Apparently Mike Kennelly spent 12 hours. He said he felt like he'd been skiing for 2 weeks to try and get this right, and he comes in and the rest of the band haven't bothered to learn it. So Zappa just says, okay, forget that. I Came From Nowhere was rehearsed. Dangerous Kissing was played once, only spontaneously, quite surprisingly. I think they should have played that. There's a synclavier piece called 44. It was just way too hard, so they abandoned that. They tried 15 seconds of it, couldn't do it. Peaches on Regalia was a big part in Europe because of it being the big selling album in the UK. That wasn't on any of these albums. There was another piece called 35, which was attempted rehearsed, but I don't know how far they got with it, which became Navanax on Civilization Phase 3. I'm not surprised they can't play that. Willie the Pimp was played, and at one point, instead of the solo, they played Ride of the Valkyries. I'm the Slime was played in a rehearsal. There was also a whole lot of Beatles songs. There were 6 Beatles songs rehearsed, apparently, at one point, straight. But then he replaced the lyrics on some of them. I'm the Walrus was played in its entirety, but then there was a medley. I'll talk about more of those in the next album. There's also a whole lot of synclavier stuff. So the synclavier was on the stage, and they could sample stuff and replay it and improvise along with it and all that stuff. There's a whole load of stuff came out of that. The main thrust of which became When Yuppies Go to Hell on Jazz Night Here. So yeah, most of the new songs were political. The big thing was the Republican retrospective medley, which basically goes through history of Republicans he doesn't like, Republican leaders he doesn't like. So obviously that means the revival of Dickie's Such an Asshole as the earliest point he wanted to start at. But ultimately you've got 3 albums of 5 CDs. So we've got the political album, the new lyrical stuff, you've got the fun stuff on Best Band You Heard in Your Life, and you've got the instrumentally scary stuff on Jazz Night Here. Split up very well. It's interesting how his guitar playing is different. And of course, at this point, he didn't touch the guitar between tours, so he had to get back into it again. And he's gone for a cleaner sound. It's a sort of, it's like glass, very clear, and he's got a bit of chorus on there, but very clean, which gives it. And it is a world away from the sort of 1973 cutting, rough sound that he had then. But that's great because it's different. It's smoother. It is smoother, but I think it complements the bigger band as well with the horns and everything. They did film 2 shows, Barcelona and Madrid. Barcelona is on YouTube and it's an okay show. It's not one of the best shows of that tour. It's still brilliant, but you know. But also Madrid was filmed, apparently a much better show. But some sort of technical problem meant that they couldn't release it. So hopefully maybe that'll get released one day.